crafted for speed, tested and worn by Bukayo Saka. The New Balance Furon V8 refines the ultra-lightweight, precision, strike-focused design for an even greater sense of speed. A new speed control stud is designed to support control during sudden stops, sharp pivots, and moves used by the fastest players on the pitch, like Saka himself. Experience engineered minimalism crafted to support explosive movement and the sharpest of touches. Learn more and purchase a Furon at newbalance.com/soccer.
Support for this podcast comes from Progressive, America's #1 boat insurer. We've all made mistakes on the water, but there's one mistake you shouldn't make: being uninsured. With Progressive Boat Insurance, you can choose coverage for most mistakes you or other boaters could make, helping you float carefree all season long. Quote today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. #1 rating based on boat market share data from ratefilings.com.
Hey, Mama, you don't have time to be messing around endlessly scrolling to find a caregiver for your child. Let me clue you in to my trick to save time and my sanity when finding a sitter. SitterCity.com. SitterCity knows what they're doing. They've been helping busy parents find the perfect sitter for over 20 years. While other sites overwhelm you by throwing hundreds of random profiles your way, SitterCity matches you with caregivers who actually fit your needs. No endless scrolling, no guesswork. I love that all caregivers undergo ID verification. They have background checks, specialized qualifications, and real parent reviews to know if they showed up on time or really know how to handle my sassy toddler. And if I need help, I can talk to a real live human, not a robot, with SitterCity's delightful team. You know, my employer pays for me to get SitterCity completely free as part of my benefits. Yours could too. SitterCity is my go-to for a smarter, simpler way to find reliable, trustworthy care. Don't wait. Go to SitterCity.com/XX and get the help you need.
Building a business may feel like a big jump, but OnDeck Small Business Loans can help keep you afloat. With lines of credit up to $100,000 and term loans up to $250,000, OnDeck lets you choose the loan that's right for your business. As a top-rated online small business lender, OnDeck's team of loan advisors can help you find the right business loan to fit your needs. Visit OnDeck.com for more information. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or Celtic Bank. OnDeck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.
Oh, Mrs. Garcia, how do you balance it all? You're a school counselor and new homeowner, a mother of two, and grad student. You're an ander. At National University, we see the whole you. That's why we're dedicated to your professional growth through faculty mentorships and career support, so you can focus on what matters most. National University, supporting the whole you. Learn more at nu.edu.
Dougie.
Sam.
Things have begun to unravel for Real Madrid and the pressure is building on Carlo Ancelotti. My question today is simple. Is his sacking this year inevitable?
Carlo Ancelotti, one of the greatest managers in the history of the game, has had a diabolical season by the standards of Real Madrid, and they got embarrassed by Arsenal over 2 legs. He's toast.
But it's not his fault. This is what he's been given to work with. Madrid have pretty much now gone down the traditional PSG route by just bringing in the names and just throwing it at the manager. Signing Mbappe didn't make sense. You know, you have a front three of Vinny, Mbappe, and Rodrigo, but they're all left wingers.
There's no way a manager from Real Madrid, I don't care who he is, can survive that. That's just the reality.
This is football. This is the sport.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of The Truth. I am your exhausted host, Sam Tighe, fresh off Jack Collins' stag do, feeling it, and a sleepless night with the little one has only compounded the pain. Joining me is my co-host, who I would bet is a fair degree fresher, Dougie Critchley. Hello, Dougs.
Hello, yes, I'm mentally much, much fresher, completely sober, unlike you two. And actually, physically, I'm struggling a little bit. I've got my first ever proper injury, I think. I was playing five-a-side last night and something in my groin popped when I was trying to stretch for a ball. So I've been hobbling around the place. I had to run for the bus this morning, which was a pretty depressing experience because I could not have less acceleration at the moment whatsoever. But I think it'll be a couple of weeks out, which is no bad thing, knowing my football skills. But I'm glad to hear that you guys survived the stag just about.
Yes, and speaking of the stag, he is also here. Stag of God for this week, we'll call him, Jack. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Been better. How are you?
Yeah, I actually feel okay. My voice is a little bit scratchy still. We're recording on Tuesday. Monday, I had pretty much no voice. But Tuesday, it's starting to come back in just in time to start recording again for the week. So, look, I'm feeling pretty loved, pretty lucky at the moment. And I'm very, very grateful for what was a wonderful, wonderful weekend. So, cannot complain at this end.
Can I get a quick highlight, Jack? What was your favourite bit?
Oh, I've really enjoyed scoring a hat-trick in my own testimonial, I've got to say. That was quite special. But like, honestly, Dougie, I'd really struggle. It was incredible walking into the house and my brother had set up a full like Jacksonbury sign. There was a band there, like a man cooking pizzas, a bar that poured pints for us. It was very, very special and incredibly well thought through. A lot of hard work from my kid brother. I'm feeling very, very grateful. It was absolutely unbelievable from start to finish.
Yeah, to add to that as well, we played 11 aside before we got to the house. So good to knacker everyone out before we even start. And at the house, there was table tennis, darts and ping pong. The Saturday, we went to the races. By the way, Jack was talking about how he had no voice on Monday. He had no voice on Saturday. It was gone. It was gone in the first 12 hours. And he was trying to start songs on the bus, on the coach over towards the races. He couldn't speak. He couldn't get anything out of his volume, out of his throat, and he had to ask others to start the songs that he wanted to start. So, yeah, I'm not surprised it was bad on Monday. We went to the races. Dougie, I won 250 quid.
Did you?
I did, yeah. I bet on all the favourites.
Congratulations. I mean, yeah, it's not a crazy strategy, but I like it. Very successful.
No, I mean, it was very successful. It was small amounts on the favourites, so you weren't getting too much. I got to the final race of the day. I'd won 35 quid. I stuck it on the favourite outright. And I don't know what the terminology here is for horses, but he won like by nose or something, or like he came through from second to first, like on the line.
Were you the biggest winner of the day, Sam?
I think someone got 300. I think someone got 300. But
Joe Goffey picked up 300, so he was feeling pretty good. So shouts out Bolton Joe for being the best at horse racing.
Absolutely. I mean, I spent half of my 250 quid on Baby Guinness at the pub about 2 hours later. I ordered one for everybody.
Needs must.
125 quid plus the guy at the bar whose birthday it was in Yorkshire. Happy birthday to you. I'm sure you're listening. Look. It was a hell of a weekend, but we should probably stop talking about that and start talking about Carlo Ancelotti. I will battle through the podcast best I can. Same way that Carlo Ancelotti is battling through life as Real Madrid manager right now, because for those of you that haven't noticed, things are threatening to go a little bit wrong for Los Blancos at the end of the season, aren't they, Dougie?
Yeah, just a little bit. And just as we've already mentioned, we are filming this on Tuesday, which is before that second leg at the Bernabeu between Real Madrid and Arsenal. Real Madrid obviously 3-0 down after a pretty comprehensive first leg. I think people might well focus on the fact that Declan Rice scored 2 unbelievable free kicks. But there was a lot more to it than that. I think Arsenal created more than 3 times the XG of Real Madrid. They had 3 times as many touches in the opposition box. 2 shots were cleared off the line by Alaba and Bellingham. It really wasn't particularly close. So no matter what happens in that second leg, and I personally expect Arsenal to see it through. There might be a few nervy moments, but I do. I think there's still a discussion to be had at the end of this season because Real Madrid are 4 points behind Barcelona with 7 games remaining. And given the current momentum that either side has, that one feels quite difficult to recover from. They've got a Copa del Rey final against Barcelona a week on Sunday as well. Barcelona have played them twice this season and scored 9 goals against them. Real Madrid lost 2 games in the entirety of last season. That was a campaign in which they won the League and Champions League. That was their 6th title in 11 years. But this season, they've lost 11 games already, including 5 in this year's Champions League, maybe 6 by the time you're listening to this, but they've lost to Lille, Liverpool, Milan, Atletico Madrid, and Arsenal. They're on track for 80 points this season, which is 15 fewer than last year, and their second lowest tally of the last 6 years. So there's the risk of ending this season with just the UEFA Super Cup and the Intercontinental Cup, which they brought back this season for some random reason, as their only silverware. And if that happens, it will be their first season without winning one of La Liga, the Copa del Rey, or the Champions League since 2021. And they have won one of those 3 in 7 of the last 9 completed campaigns. So rumours are everywhere that Ancelotti will leave Real Madrid at the end of this season. But I suppose, Sam, before we get into who could replace him or even necessarily what's gone wrong. Was there signs in the summer and the early parts of this season that this campaign was going to be as difficult as it's turned out?
I think the answer to that question will differ depending on who you ask, because I'm sure a lot of people got very wrapped up in the Kylian Mbappe acquisition and assumed that Real Madrid, reigning European champions, would simply go from strength to strength by adding arguably the best footballer on the planet to their ranks. I mean, that does make some logical sense, I guess, right, Dougie?
Absolutely.
But if you're an old tactical codger like me, you'd have been stood there hammering on the bell saying, guys, we need to have a serious discussion here about what this would mean for the team function, the team structure. So yes, Mbappe is super exciting. Yes, he's going to score a lot of goals. But are we absolutely sure that we're not walking into a situation here that's a little bit uncomfortably reminiscent of what PSG just got themselves out of with the Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe front three that are mercurial, beautiful to watch, but don't press, don't do any defending, and showed us really that in the modern game, it's very, very difficult to compete at the very top level, the very fine margins in the elite level, when you have that many players in your team that are passengers in the defensive game. And I was certainly a little bit curious as to how this works, because they were already running Vinicius and Rodrigo and Jude Bellingham in very free-form attacking roles with very little defensive onus on most of those players. And then you add Mbappe in, who doesn't do any defending. You've got potentially four players here that you could be asking to do very little defending. Now, Bellingham has picked up a lot of the slack when he's had to, but it's by design that Vinicius and Mbappe play up front together and don't really do any defending and don't do any pressing. So ultimately, I feel like I kind of saw this coming. I saw a lot of goals for Mbappe coming, but I saw Madrid potentially getting worse as a team, especially when you work in the fact that Toni Kroos was the one that stepped out of the team for Mbappe to come back in. The great man retired and they took out the midfield linchpin. And, you're looking at that team against Arsenal, and it's the front four that I've mentioned, and 39-year-old Luka Modric in central midfield. Now, Camavinga gets a red card in the 93rd minute, stretched all over the pitch. I know it's Real Madrid, so we all just assume it's going to be fine, but the signs were always there, Dukes.
Yeah, they absolutely were, and that formation Timber really controlled Vinicius Jr. really, really effectively. I thought Marzlov-Skelly had an amazing game against Rodrigo, and Marino dropping so deep as kind of a fourth central midfielder, creating a sort of diamond midfield behind Modric just meant that Modric, who is a complete legend of the game, but he did look every one of his 39 years in that game, and Declan Rice picked so many holes alongside him, behind him, and was just driving through with abandon. I think the summer business as well, I'll maybe bring Jack in on this, because the last time I brought up this guy, Sam effectively bullied me. But there was also the departures of Joselu.
Oh, here we go.
And there was also the departures of Nacho, who was club captain. And that is three big figures in their success in recent years. Nacho, not necessarily always as a starter, and neither Joselu. But there was a big sort of departure of leadership and sort of experience of playing for Real Madrid that summer.
Yeah, I think that you make a good point, Dougie. Look, I think Nacho might be the key here, because when you look at the squad building, and I think Sam probably makes a very good point there, that you look at some of the players that the left, yes, there was questions of imbalances between Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. But more than that, the thing that kind of struck me was I was looking at this squad and thinking, I hope nothing happens to Dani Carvajal, who's had no rest whatsoever over the course of the summer because he played pretty much every minute for Spain. There was one game, I think, where he was given a rest and Jesus Navas played.
Well, he was suspended, wasn't he? They had to play Navas against Mbappe.
But apart from that, he'd had almost no rest. He goes straight back in there and you're thinking, is Lucas Vazquez the answer? And one of the things that kind of strikes me about Nacho's departure is that when Real Madrid had a hole at right back last year, Nacho just, slotted in there. When they had a space at centre-back and no one was there, Nacho slotted in there. And he brings an incredible amount of experience, as you say, Dukes, club captain. And look, it wasn't everybody's favourite player. I don't think there's loads of people going to go around with Nacho on the back of their shirt. But you do look at it and think he was a useful squad piece to bring in. And we talked about Real Madrid, I think it was on Ranks before Christmas, and we were talking about the transfer window. And one of the phrases I used was, I would be absolutely stunned if they don't bring in a sort of right-back, centre-back hybrid, even as a short-term thing in the January window. I thought they might even look at someone like a Juan Foyth at Villarreal, who just might do a job for 6 months, right?
I pitched Milan Skriniar because he was going spare. I was like, you might not have all the money in the world here, but you need somebody.
You could find a solution, a short-term solution. There are countless players that want to play for Real Madrid, right? And instead, they've left themselves exposed. Now, Fede Valverde has done a wonderful job at right back because Fede Valverde might be the most versatile player in the world. But then you look at that midfield against Arsenal in the first leg, and again, Real Madrid might have come back by the time you're listening to this. They might.
We might look silly on Friday, but to be clear, Madrid, who are like the most famous club in the world for Champions League comebacks, haven't turned around the deficit like this since 1985. So even for Madrid, this is a big ask, which is probably why we've decided to talk about it, even though it might make us look very silly on Friday.
Look, even if they were to go and win 4-0 against Arsenal, I think there are bigger and kind of darker truths at work here that we probably need to address either way, right? Yes, can Real Madrid pull out a kind of one-of-a-kind comeback at the Bernabeu in the second leg of this kind of possibly, right? Like if anyone was going to do it, I'd back it to be Real Madrid. But more than that, I think you're seeing in real time in La Liga, in the game against Alaves at the weekend, in that game against Arsenal, in the loss to Valencia, like these things are there. This isn't going to change everything. It will change things in a how is everyone looking at the club sense. But I don't think it changed the underlying narrative of actually where this is. And I think that's probably a thing. Valverde playing at right back, how much could they have done with him in midfield in that game? And they can't at the moment because they don't trust Lucas Vazquez to be doing that role at right back. I think Carlo Ancelotti has got some decisions wrong in recent weeks. I think throwing David Alaba in at left back in this Arsenal game felt like a massive risk when he's just coming back from a major injury, when he's completely strapped up. And that's exactly what happened. He was, done one-on-one. I'd be stunned if it's not Fran Garcia coming in there on Wednesday in this game. So I think that what we're seeing here is kind of a breakdown in communication between the idea of what, Real Madrid is and bringing in a Kylian Mbappe. And yes, okay, it was a free transfer, but the signing on fees and the contract make all of that kind of irrelevant. When you had massive holes in the squad, massive gaps in the squad, Toni Kroos's departure, Nacho's departure, the fact that there isn't backups in some of the key areas of the pitch where you have players who have been overstretched and overworked all throughout last year and then over the summer as well, that suggests to me poor squad planning. And whilst I take the point that Carlo Ancelotti probably doesn't have to bear the blame for all of that, there is also a level of it that you think, well, Carlo hasn't always been the world's best tactician, right? What he has done is given players the freedom to express themselves within a system that works for them. And as that freedom seems to have been diminished by the fact that this squad is no longer playing to the level that it was last season, I think he has to bear some of the blame for not being more sturdy, even if it was in January, and saying, these are the players we need to get through the end of this season. We cannot do this without them, and not fighting that corner and not fighting that kind of element of how they needed to bring players in.
Jack, you mentioned some of the results there as well, Valencia and Alaves and a few of those. The 4-4 with Real Sociedad in the Copa was, you can't watch that and come away with the idea that Madrid are a particularly well-functioning team. And it is weird, isn't it, when you have to sort of disassociate the two things, when you always kind of expect Madrid to win the game regardless because they have better players than most teams. So they'll probably, we often say, get away with it. But probably the best way to put that is they will overpower other teams. But when you're watching that game against Real Sociedad, a team who are in 9th in La Liga, like having a pretty poor season by their standards, and it's absolute carnage up and down the pitch. It's so hard to come to the conclusion that this Madrid team are really deserving of that sort of benefit of the doubt that a lot of people will inevitably give them. Now, we've talked about the squad there, and the injuries have been a factor too. And we'll just chuck, I don't think he's been mentioned yet, so we'll just mention Eder Militao, another ACL, just like horrible. Carvajal obviously did his. Alaba coming back from his. We haven't seen Ferland Mendy for about a month now. They've had both goalkeepers out at one point. They had the third choice in. I can't remember his name. Fran Rodriguez, is it? I think. So yeah, that's how prominent he is. I have to really scratch my head on that one. That is also a factor. But Ancelotti too. So Ancelotti, like, it's hard to think of another manager actually in world football that you think on paper would be able to cope with this sort of situation as well as him, because he's so good at giving multiple attacking players that attacking freedom and saying, go on, lads, I trust you. I'm going to imbue you with confidence and power, and you're going to go and sort this out, and I'll tie it up at the back. But perhaps it's the case that this iteration of Madrid it's too much for even Carlo Ancelotti to be able to tie together. The addition of Mbappe into that front three that already kind of tested the boundaries, let's say, in terms of finding the balance, losing Toni Kroos and then the injuries. Dougie, where do you land on this? Like, Carlo, how at fault is he?
I think he's a little bit at fault, but I think if I was to define this Real Madrid season by anything, I think it's not going to be about Vinicius Jr. taking a little bit of a drop-off, Mbappe adapting. Maybe it took a couple of months longer than people expected, Bellingham's new role. I think it will be defined by injuries. 8 Barcelona players have played at least 2,000 league minutes. There's only 5 Real Madrid players that have. Carvajal missing over 50 games, Eder Militao 49, Alaba, Camavinga over 20, Courtois 13. And you look at their underlying numbers, it's not dramatically different from last season. Their expected goals per game was 2.1 last year. It's now 2.3. Their expected goals against has gone from 1 to 1.1. So what's changed fundamentally? I think Barcelona are now just a really good side, to be totally honest. I think you look at the way their attacking numbers have exploded. They're averaging 3 goals a game across this entire season. Players like Rafinha, Pedri, Inigo Martinez even have hit a new level. Lewandowski is back on form. And then Lamine Yamal is Lamine Yamal. He's just been absolutely frighteningly good. So yes, there are issues with Real Madrid. And I think particularly in the Champions League, the fact that going into this week, they've conceded 20 goals in the Champions League, 2 more than any other quarter-finalist. That is pretty shocking, given the fact there's a Dortmund side in these quarterfinals that are 8th in the Bundesliga and have had a terrible season. And their expected goal difference per 90 of 0.43 is 6th out of 8 sides as well. It's only marginally better than Villa and Dortmund. So their Champions League form has been a bit of a car crash, to be totally honest. But they still comprehensively outplayed Man City. They still played reasonably well in the first leg, I would say, of that game against Atleti. They obviously rode their luck with that double hit from Julian Alvarez. And I do think it's easy to say, he should have used Endrick more. He should have used Arda Güler more. He should have used Brahim Diaz more. But if you look on paper, I don't think he's consistently picked the wrong players. I think Rodrigo is the player that you want to get in this side.
Because he does some work. He's exactly. Not the only one that runs.
You saw Jude Bellingham talking about it, I think it was after the City tie maybe, saying that this is a guy that's played out of position. He wants to play on the left and that is willing to sacrifice himself for the side. And I think the sort of inference by that was he's an amazing team player and we don't have a squad full of amazing team players at times. Maybe it wasn't as subtle as that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I don't think Ancelotti has picked the wrong squad consistently, especially because the players that are being called on to start more regularly. Endrick's 18. He's arrived from Brazil. Arda Güler has come off an injury hit season last year. He's only 20, 21. I don't think Ancelotti has done badly, considering he hasn't really had a left back for much of the campaign. He's missed his two really star centre-backs alongside Rudiger and hasn't had a right back all season as well. And his goalkeeper's been out. To get this deep into a La Liga campaign, to get into a Copa del Rey, I mean, as we record this, they are still technically on for a treble. It looks like it will be done by the time this podcast goes out. But I don't think it's been as bad as people have made out. It's just been a bit disappointing on the back of an amazing campaign last year.
So it would be pretty hypocritical for me to ignore all of that evidence, particularly relating to injuries, when I've been sat here all season going, the reason Villa have underperformed is because we've had to field 11 different centre-back partnerships. Like, we all know how impactful this stuff can be. So I'm not trying to take it away from that. However, I do feel like a manager as good as Carlo Ancelotti could have taken maybe a few more steps towards mitigating some of the problems. So maybe this is just his ultimate relaxed attitude, maybe biting him by being a bit too extreme. But like, if you know that you're dealing with a front two that isn't going to press and isn't going to do any defensive work, and just a stat from the La Pausa pod, just to cement that, Madrid made 36 high-intensity pressures in the final third against Arsenal. It was the fewest by any team in a Champions League knockout stage game this season. So the 72nd most out of 72. So that's Vini and Mbappe doing nothing. If that happens every week, right? That's normal. It's not like the way they set up against Arsenal was particularly or overly different to how they've often set up this season and at times last season too. Could he have done a bit more? Considering the defensive injuries and considering what the attackers don't do off the ball, were there other ways to configure this team? Were there other sacrifices to make? I have not watched every single Real Madrid game and I cannot give you a blueprint, but I cannot help but feel that there were more things that he could have done to try and abate this. Now, whether that's just like there's pressure from above because Florentino Perez wants the big boys on the pitch and he wants the goals and it's Madrid and the stadium demands attacking football, I don't know. But in a team, albeit injury hit, with this many quality players, and the midfielders that they have, with Camavinga and Tchouaméni able to do what they do in open spaces, put out fires, react to things, and have these individual moments that mitigate all tactical structural failings very often, could more have been done? I cannot help but feel the answer is yes, genuinely. And that you have to keep it in mind that we're still talking about a team that, you're right, is technically on for the treble. So I don't want to be too harsh as well. And I'm not ignoring the injuries. But when Madrid fans are going, oh, if only we had Dani Ceballos in there, he'd calm things down. I'm like, wait, what? What's gone wrong here? How's that happened? How have you got to that point?
Yeah, I mean, just as you're going through the sort of options there, what I keep coming back to is, would a double pivot of Camavinga, Tchouaméni, and then Bellingham in front and Fede Valverde at right back have been more solid throughout this season? Probably, but then Tchouaméni's had to be used so often at centre-back and he's still getting doubted when he's playing in midfield as well. I think Camavinga has been the more successful signing of the two of them.
And he was fantastic at the weekend.
Yeah. So it is difficult. And I think, we've come back to it a couple of times, but Fede Valverde is probably a top 3 midfielder in the world. And he hasn't really been often been able to use, in his preferred role as well. And then you've got the fact that Mbappe's done his best work when Vinicius Jr.'s often not been in the team. Vinicius Jr. taking a sort of understandable drop-off after a supernova campaign last year. And there's just so many issues throughout that side. But I suppose it brings us on to what happens next, really. I mean, Jack, do you think it is inevitable that he leaves this summer? I mean, I think me and Sam seem to be on the same page, but what do you think?
Yeah, I was talking with Charlie Stilitano on the radio the other day, and he basically was like, if Real Madrid exit the Champions League at the quarterfinals to Arsenal, there is absolutely no chance that Carlo Ancelotti is in charge of this side next year. He was like, there's just none. Real Madrid managers don't survive that kind of thing. And look, he was telling a story about being at the game that they played against Atalanta earlier in the campaign, where actually their kind of Champions League hopes were a little bit on the line. And you remember that people were starting to be like, hang on, are Real Madrid even going to make it through here at this point with the games they have in front of them, et cetera, et cetera. Now, they won that game, but Charlie was basically talking about the fact that he was speaking to Carlo beforehand, and he was like, yeah, if I lose this, I'm going to get sacked. Like, if I lose this game, then I'm just going to be gone. He was like, it's not personal. It's Real Madrid. It's what they do. He was like, it's not going to be one of those things. It's just how the club operates. And I won't take it as a personal slight, but ultimately the team will not be playing, well enough for me to justify being carried on as coach. And it all felt, as a story anyway, quite matter of fact. Now, I appreciate it's a secondhand story, but I take the point that I think when it comes to Real Madrid, so much of the last few years have revolved around this team being built around, either very, very secure midfield partnerships that, were able to be kind of built upon, and then an incredible attacking force last year that felt like it was pretty well balanced. And look, they wanted a number 9. Carlo wanted it to be Harry Kane. Instead, they ended up playing Jude Bellingham in that kind of false 9 role, or at least as a kind of an attacking 10 at the point of a diamond, and it working out. And they go on and they win the Champions League. But that felt like there was some balance to that team. This year, it feels imbalanced. And I wonder, is this the point where Florentino Perez, look, I've said this kind of from the beginning of the last couple of years. Obviously not in the same way that it was built the last time, but this does feel a bit Galacticos 2.0 in terms of what Real Madrid have been doing. Now, a lot of it's been free transfers, right? It's been waiting for players to come in at the end of their contracts and sort that out and then kind of move on from there. But it feels a little bit Galacticos 2.0. And I think that if you're doing that, you have to have someone who's going to be a bit more of a taskmaster, potentially a bit more of a kind of tactical shape kind of person in order to actually get them to play within a structure. And I think Carlo's that kind of setup and the build he's had of a squad has worked so well for such a long time because he's had generals that he can trust in key areas and then been able to let this, his kind of like mavericks fly. And now this squad feels too maverick heavy and there isn't the players that he trusts in the same way. And it's just not working in terms of go out there and do it with Real Madrid. And I wonder if that's the reason they have to change tack in the summer in order to try and shape a squad that has already been built here into something that's more slightly kind of tactically astute and maybe slightly more kind of balanced in terms of how they're setting up.
Tired of scrolling through endless sitter profiles on other sites only to get ghosted? For over 20 years, Sitter City has been the go-to resource for parents who want a more personalized, reliable way to find trustworthy sitters and nannies. While other sites flood you with options, Sitter City focuses on bringing you high-quality matches that are the right fit for your family every time. With SitterCity.com, you can find full-time, part-time, or occasional care that meets your specific needs. Every caregiver is ID verified and profiles include real parent reviews, background checks, and specialized experience, so you can spend less time searching and more time doing what matters most, spending time with your family. And did you know that many employers include Sitter City as part of their benefits package? In a few clicks, find out if you can get Sitter City free. Getting started has never been easier. Take the guesswork out of finding care so you can breathe easier knowing your kids are in good hands. Visit SitterCity.com today to get the care you need.
Building a business may feel like a big jump, but OnDeck Small Business Loans can help keep you afloat. With lines of credit up to $100,000 and term loans up to $250,000, OnDeck lets you choose the loan that's right for your business. As a top-rated online small business lender, OnDeck's team of loan advisors can help you find the right business loan to fit your needs. Visit OnDeck.com for more information. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or Celtic Bank. OnDeck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.
Oh, Mrs. Garcia, how do you balance it all? You're a school counselor and new homeowner, a mother of two, and grad student. You're an ander. At National University, we see the whole you. That's why we're dedicated to your professional growth through faculty mentorships and career support, so you can focus on what matters most. National University, supporting the whole you. Learn more at nu.edu.
This country was built on a distinctly American work ethic, but today, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries, and with that, we sent away good jobs and diminished our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make a variety of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more. All made right here in the USA, from growing the cotton and adding the final touches. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs for seamsters, cutters, and factory workers in towns and cities across the United States. And it's about more than an income. Jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allo or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, Businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
So do you think they actually should go and secure a tactical taskmaster? Because to be honest, I look at the squad, the way I read the build of the squad, it suggests to me that they should try to find the opposite of that, which is effectively Carlo Ancelotti. I feel like
the opposite of that is no longer working. Is probably the point I would make.
Yeah, well, a fresh face is always important, but can you find Carlo toned down to 80%? And this is difficult because I had a look at the managers across the world and I couldn't really find him. So what I'm suggesting perhaps doesn't exist. But what do you actually think will happen if they were to bring in, and I'm not saying this guy, but it's just the first name that comes to my head when it comes to like strict tactical discipline, like Roger Schmidt and his pressing system, right? Imagine for a second that Roger Schmidt was remotely qualified for this job and they were like, right, come in and let's do this. And what do you think Vinicius and Mbappe, like,
oh yeah, I think they would ignore him.
Yeah, so that sounds like a good idea.
You have to have a certain aura and you have to have a certain stature, I think, to come in as the Real Madrid manager at this point, right? So the obvious candidate is clearly Xabi Alonso, someone who has a history with the club, someone who has turned around something very, very interesting as a blueprint, I think, in Germany, and who has already had success in a fledgling managerial career, who has spent time in the club, started his coaching, working with the Real Madrid unders teams before he went off to Real Sociedad and then went over to Bayer Leverkusen when he thought the time was right. But one of the things about Xabi Alonso is that, yes, he has that aura. Yes, people will listen to him. Yes, he has the kind of charisma, I think, to carry this as the Real Madrid coach. But also, you wouldn't sit here and say his Leverkusen sides are particularly laissez-faire.
No. I think he's actually a really good balance. Really nice, because I think he'd probably do enough structurally with the defence, but still allow the attack to do its thing. Because I think that's probably his bread and butter with Leverkusen, is allowing guys like Florian Wirtz to figure it out. And we've actually criticised him a little bit this season for maybe not playing with a number 9 when he should, which might suit Real Madrid down to the ground because they play with Mbappe and Vidi, and neither of whom really want to play as a number 9. So the fact that he can actually formulate an attacking trident without necessarily having a Hosselu, Dougie, up there,
shout out my boy,
is a good thing in the context of this Real Madrid team. And the fact that he's almost guaranteed to put a bit more structure through the midfield and defence, we all agree that is what this team is lacking. And you touched on it there, but you need an aura or a presence or a certain reputation to manage Real Madrid, which means that if we do start to look at other names, the shortlist is unbelievably short, isn't it, for Real Madrid? I mean, Dougie, did you manage to come up with any other names other than Xabi Alonso? Because I got Conte, who doesn't suit the team tactically, but has the personality for an elite club. And I got Luis Enrique, and then I wrote the word sacrilege next to it. So I might as well have just crossed it out. And that's as far as I got.
Yeah, well, we already know from about 12 episodes ago that Simone Inzaghi's taking over at Real Madrid.
Of course, that's right.
According to my mad idea, which I'm actually going further and further away with each passing day. But I thought Jack's point where he said, when the time was right, Xabi Alonso joined Bayer Leverkusen. I thought that was worth just dialing in on a second, because when he was at Real Sociedad B, he got the opportunity about 6 months before he went to Leverkusen to take over Gladbach, and he turned it down and said the time wasn't right. Now, I'm not suggesting that he'll definitely do that this summer, but I think there is a world where Xabi Alonso wants to stay at Leverkusen for another year. Look, the Real Madrid job doesn't come up that often, but for Xabi Alonso, it probably does. And so he might just think, look, it hasn't been the best year for Leverkusen. It was inevitable that they were going to drop off. They lost one game all season last year. Still one of the most remarkable achievements in my footballing experience. But I don't know whether he will just think, I can do another 12 months here. I can see out another season of Wirtz if he doesn't leave, and then leave on the back of 2026 World Cup and join fresh when Real Madrid don't have a Club World Cup to go to as well this summer, which I think is maybe going to be a factor in a few clubs' judgment. Like, will Chelsea consider sacking Maresca when they're just about to jet off to America and then have a very, very short pre-season? I don't know. It might be a factor.
Club World Cup is the pre-season, Dougie.
Exactly. But in terms of other names that have been linked, Iraola's been linked from Bournemouth. Huge step up.
Massive no.
I was looking at the favourites as well on Odds Checker as well. Other betting comparison sites are available. And Zidane was down there. That's not happening. Klopp was down there, which I thought was quite interesting.
Interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I've always thought Jurgen Klopp feels very Real Madrid, if I'm totally honest. He had some amazing ties against Real Madrid. Well, particularly in his Dortmund days, but again at Liverpool as well. And they've always felt quite stylistically like he's more Real Madrid than Barcelona, at least
I would agree with that.
Absence of Barcelona DNA. Does he want to stop his quite cushy job with Leipzig, where he seems to travel a lot?
He's not Leipzig, is he? He's got global head of sport for Red Bull or something.
Sure.
And I think he's next in line for Yuki Tsunoda's seat if he doesn't quite work out, because they're running out of bloody drivers.
Yeah, 100%. The other one, Dougie, that's probably worth chucking in here whilst we're at it is Raul, who is currently the manager of Castilla. Now, it hasn't been particularly plain sailing. The reserve side haven't, torn up any trees in recent years. But equally, I imagine that's a pretty tricky job in that players are just sort of coming in and out all of the time. And therefore, to actually get a balanced squad and build it doesn't always feel like the easiest task in the world. He did win the UEFA Youth League with Real Madrid's under-19s. And if we're talking about aura within the club, if they're looking for short-term stopgaps, I'd imagine that his name would be very, very high up that list. If they were to say, if they did go and approach Xabi Alonso and he said, look, one more year, I'm going to do one more year and then I'll be ready for this, then I would be unsurprised, shall we say, if they put Raul in for just a stopgap year. Although that probably brings up another conversation and elicits another discussion about the idea, can Real Madrid affords to sort of just have a year like that, especially if there is kind of this sense that this is a pretty special group of players, or there are certain players in here who are at a special point in their careers. Can you afford to just have a year where you're like, okay, we'll just wait 1 year for Xabi Alonso?
Yeah, and if Barcelona are ahead of you and that Barcelona team are pretty young, pretty hungry and pretty special themselves and can only get better, can you afford to lose that ground on Barca too? It's very, very difficult to imagine a club like Real Madrid with the mentality they have kind of accepting that. They'll obviously have the best read of anybody as to how good Raul is as a manager, but it doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it? I know he was a legendary striker for the club, but replacing Carlo Ancelotti, guys, Carlo Ancelotti and his achievements at the club over 2 stints, like, he's a bit of a legend there. No matter how poorly, in inverted commas, this season feels like it's gone so far. La Liga wins in 22, 24, still possible in 25. A Copa, 2 Super Copas, 2 Champions League. Add those to the one that he won in 2014. Like, this is managerial excellence that's unfortunately seems like it's kind of sliding to a halt, as all things do. But the guy that follows Carlo Ancelotti, it's got to be a great manager.
It's a weird one, though. I do wonder if there is something in, he's been linked with this Brazil job for such a long period of time now. And it's been made, eminently clear that he is their favourite candidate if he's available. If Real Madrid are like, look, we're coming to the end of a period here and it hasn't been good enough. And as we say, it's not very Real Madrid to just stick with someone for the sake of sticking with them because they can't find anybody else. I wonder if there will be a kind of like, look, that job's up for you, that job's possible for you. Maybe that is something that the two parties just sort of agree to on their kind of general terms, in that it's just a little bit calmer than perhaps it would be with another person. Carlo and Florentino Perez seem to have a pretty good relationship. That isn't going to stop Perez sacking him if he doesn't think the results have been good enough. But there might be conversations to be had there as kind of we want this to end on good terms as well because of what you've done for the club.
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake about it. It would be huge for Real Madrid to sack Carlo Ancelotti after a season in which they signed the player in Kylian Mbappe that they've been chasing since he was in nappies, effectively. and it looks like their best chance of winning a trophy this season against a Barcelona that are still pretty skint is the Copa del Rey. It would be a huge disappointment, and Ancelotti will take a lot of the flack for that. There's multiple other factors. But it's clear that across Ancelotti's entire career, as special as his record is in terms of 5 Champions Leagues, in terms of winning every one of the top 5 leagues in Europe as well. The fact that he's only ever won 6 league titles in his career as well, despite managing top clubs since joining Juventus in 1999, that is a slight blot on his CV, I would say. And I mean, it's something he admits as well. I think his autobiography was called I Prefer Cups. And he's literally stuck by it all the way through. So maybe he'll finish with the Copa del Rey this year. Who knows? Maybe there's even an outside bet that they've got past Arsenal. I struggle to imagine it. But if it is the end this year, he won the most important trophy in Real Madrid's, I would say, recent history, 21st century history, in La Decima. He was fired the year after that, came back, and he's won 2 League and Champions League doubles since. It's really pretty special stuff, and he will always be remembered in Real Madrid's history, but it does feel like the end is nigh, sadly.
It does. Yeah, it does. I just want to clear something up I said earlier, actually, and I want to do it because you guys have both kind of mentioned something that's made me realize that it's a bit of a talking point. I said that it'd be hard for a team like Real Madrid, the way they're sort of structured with the attack, passengers and defense, to sort of compete and win at the top level. They are reigning European champions. They had a very defensively lax set of forwards last year, and they won it.
Not quite as bad though, Sam.
Obviously, yeah,
to the same extent.
No, the Mbappe for Kroos switch,
Yeah.
It adds another sort of 25%. But it made me think, all right, so I just quickly flick back through, the state of the top level of European football last season, and it has made me kind of realise. We look back on that now, sort of 12 months on. The state of European football at the very top level right now feels a lot stronger than it did last season. Madrid got to a final against Dortmund that we all knew they were going to win. There was absolutely like zero chance that Dortmund were going to upset Madrid in that game. And you look back
Dortmund
to
did
the
all right, though,
semis
to be fair.
and but it's Dortmund, Dougie. They're not going to beat Madrid in the final. Like, it's just not going to happen. But Tuchel's Bayern, this was Tuchel's Bayern. They were very poor. PSG looked nothing like the PSG we're watching right now. Arsenal was still very new to the Champions League, or at least like that crop was. I think last season was Bukayo Saka's first ever season in the Champions League. There was his first Champions League minutes. Liverpool weren't even in the Champions League last season. They were in the Europa League. It was a poor year last year, but Madrid did what they needed to do. And I kind of mentioned this because I'm trying to support my own point at the top, but also, Dougie, you mentioned what's changed. Barcelona are really good now. And Barcelona have taken several steps forward, as have Liverpool, as have Arsenal, and Bayern look better than they did last season. And Inter are probably a bit better. PSG are a hell of a lot better. Madrid maybe haven't even changed that much. Maybe it is more about the rest of Europe catching up. And that kind of supports the idea that Carlo's been let down a little bit by a squad build. And of course, as we've discussed, got a bit unlucky with some really important injuries. Jack, you mentioned Raul has a tough job managing Castilla. Sometimes he gets players ripped away from him. He was probably banking on having old Raul Asensio all season.
Yep.
No, mate, not possible. He has to play 15 first-team games. But there we go. Anyway, that's it. That's Carlo. That's Real Madrid. I can go and lie down now.
I thought you did very well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me, chaps. Dougie, excellent work as usual.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it. Good luck with the recovery. Keep the fluids high and the veggies in.
I'll do one of those two things. The fluids.
Yeah, you can take your pick, right?
I'm not going to eat vegetables, and you can't make me. Jack, I appreciate you as ever.
Thank you, Sam. Enjoy your incredibly beige food. I hope you have a wonderful time with it, and thank you for having me.
Hell yeah, mac and cheese and chicken goujons coming right up. And thank you to you, Rank Squad. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Tired of scrolling through endless sitter profiles on other sites only to get ghosted? For over 20 years, Sitter City has been the go-to resource for parents who want a more personalized, reliable way to find trustworthy sitters and nannies. While other sites flood you with options, Sitter City focuses on bringing you high-quality matches that are the right fit for your family every time. With SitterCity.com, you can find full-time, part-time, or occasional care that meets your specific needs. Every caregiver is ID verified, and profiles include real parent reviews, background checks, and specialized experience, so you can spend less time searching and more time doing what matters most, spending time with your family. And did you know that many employers include Sitter City as part of their benefits package? In a few clicks, Find out if you can get SitterCity free. Getting started has never been easier. Take the guesswork out of finding care so you can breathe easier knowing your kids are in good hands. Visit SitterCity.com today to get the care you need.
Building a business may feel like a big jump, but OnDeck Small Business Loans can help keep you afloat. With lines of credit up to $100,000 and term loans up to $250,000, OnDeck lets you choose the loan that's right for your business. As a top-rated online small business lender, OnDeck's team of loan advisors can help you find the right business loan to fit your needs. Visit OnDeck.com for more information. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or Celtic Bank. OnDeck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.
Oh, Mrs. Garcia, how do you balance it all? You're a school counselor and new homeowner, a mother of two, and grad student. You're an ander. At National University, we see the whole you. That's why we're dedicated to your professional growth through faculty mentorships and career support, so you can focus on what matters most. National University, supporting the whole you. Learn more at nu.edu.